Welcome to Discovering. Our birch bark canoe is one step away from its maiden voyage. Tonight, some of the final touches.
You know, you can see this part here is meant to be buried, and then this part here is meant to be seen. Because we make the boats waterproof up to this line here.
And Kristen was in the Keweenaw for a look at a bunch of deer. Sit back and relax. It's Monday night and time for Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Well, it won't be long now when our birch bark canoe will be in the water for its maiden voyage. First, as you might have guessed, it needs some waterproofing. And as you may have also guessed, everything needed to do that comes from the woods.
Okay, well this is one of the ways to get the pitch. It's got to be either spruce or pine. Fir and larch and stuff won't really, it's not the right kind of pitch. This is one of the nice things about this kind of canoe building. You get to roam around in the woods looking for all this cool stuff. You never know, you might find some chaga or something on the way. A lot of times there'll be a big fat caterpillar, like a worm inside of it. We call them pitch worms. I imagine it's like a moth or somebody's larva. It's terpenes. Turpentine is extracted if you put this in a still. And that's the volatile organic compounds, your VOC. This is the Stone Age VOC. The volatiles, the turpentine evaporates out and this slowly gets harder. So as it ages, it goes from being 30 weight oil and ends up being 100 weight, million weight oil. So when the turpentine all evaporates out is becomes what we call rosin. I even found an old box of this. This is what you rub your violin bows in. A lot of people nowadays, they can just buy this in quantity. Been waiting all year to use that little bit. So here we just get a square of burlap, fold it up 3 ways so it makes an envelope. We'll put the mixture in here, and then we're going to twist it and squeeze all the clean pitch out, and then all the gungatang stays inside there. How much goo can you get out of that? This makes a really nice torch. You put that on the end of a stick. It'd be just like the ones in the castles in the old movies. Well, let's let that cool off for a second. This stuff's pretty precious. Every little bit counts. So if we put that on the end of a stick, that'd make a great torch. In the old days, they would take pine knots and put it in a basket made out of like green willow or just green wood. When the French Canadians showed up, and they would put torches on the end of their canoes for hunting and fishing at night, the blacksmiths would make an iron basket that would hang off the end of the boat so that the pitch didn't drip into the boat and catch the bark canoe on fire out in the middle of the lake. So Torch Lake, Lac de Flambeau, that was because when the first French folks came by, the Indians were out hunting. And then we'd come by at nighttime and camped out, and then they see across the lake all these lights and flames moving around. So that would be the Lake of the Torches.
Canoes on fire.
Yeah, that burns good. There we go. That's precious stuff. I love all the old ways of doing things. That's my life. Yeah, look at that. That's part of a boat. You can see the rosin powder on the bottom. And then this here will add some of this stuff to charcoal. If you drop one spark in there, this whole thing will turn into a coal in a few minutes. We think microfiber is new technology. Well, to add this to the pitch, besides it makes more pitch, you have all these little microfibers all throughout the pitch. As the pitch weathers over the years, it chalks off instead of flakes off, because of the microfiber keeps the flaking down to the little micro bits, so that it's just slowly chalking off like a good paint does. And it also gives fiber inside, so it doesn't tend to split or crack as much. And then we add bear fat. This is the best lard on earth. Puts pig lard to shame. If I wasn't a canoe maker, I would be cooking with this. How much bear fat do you got in your refrigerator? Alrighty, making sure you don't get any drips of water going there. We don't want this to explode in our face. Thin piece of bark like this. You dip it in. You put this in the cold water. Now you can see what that'll act like. See that shatters like that? That needs more bear grease. Ice water. Still fracturing. Well, that tells us what we need to know. Even a little more. You don't want to put too much. That's the best smelling soup I think I ever made. What I'm looking for is I like it to crack but not shatter. I think this time's gonna be it. Could be a little darker. It's hot sauce. Yeah, now we're talking. I like to see cracks, but I don't like the shattering. Okay. We pounded all those ribs in like you saw. Then you pound them in halfway, flip it over like this, and you just pour hot water on this for, well, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Just keep it warm. The bark's all stretching. You can hear everything starting to tick, tick, tick. The lashing is stretching. All the joints, you can imagine how many pieces there are all stitched together. Everything is, you're pushing it to the very limit. And, the ribs have stretched the bark out. You can see the inner layer of bark starting to show through, and some of that gooey pitch oozing out on some of these. Because a lot of hot water went on here, so that all started to flow around. And what that also does is that the layer of pitch on the inside of this bark then heats up and flows into all the nooks and crannies, and hopefully will fill up most of the little holes that we don't even know about. And the pressure from the inside, that's the pitch on the inside starting to ooze out of these gore cuts. Because that's what all these cuts were for. You see now, the old alligator skin is shaped like a boat. Didn't start out that way. I like a lot of rocker in my boats, which means that the center of the boat, you see it'll rock. If you put it on a flat surface, it'll rock just the highest point here. And what that is that sits in the water, the boat's sitting in the water, and then it turns really easy. This is the spinning point of a canoe, whereas if a flat bottom boat, you try to turn that, it's like a battleship. It's going to take you a half a mile to make the turn. But for maneuverability, and if you got a bark boat, you need to be able to turn fast, because it could be a boulder right there. Then it turns fast on the center, so that's called rocker. And get a little bit of, put a little bit of rise on the end so that if you hit an obstruction, it'll tend to want to go up over the obstruction instead of just plowing right into it and breaking into your boat. It makes it a little harder to paddle until you know how to paddle. It separates the sheep from the goats when you learn how to paddle a boat like this. We added on the extra 2 feet on each end to make the 14.5 foot. This is added in, it fits underneath, overlaps a couple inches. That's what the bump here is. So then I got to go through, I like to trim it down a little bit, ever so carefully. It may be a 45, so if you hit a rock or something, the pitch will have something to adhere to. It needs a little roughness. One false move and we're back to square one. And perfection is not needed here. This all gets buried in the pitch. We just want a friendly edge. You can see the peg hole there, that's what held those 2 pieces together during construction. That all gets filled up. Got a few warts. That's just the personality of the tree. I guess we all get a few warts one way or another. You can see this part here is meant to be buried, and then this part here is meant to be seen. Because we make the bows waterproof up to this line here. So if you ever wonder what happens to all those fancy white shirts that you give off to the thrift shop, they all end up on the bows and sterns of birch bark canoes. I only used Ralph Lauren on my canoe. Then this, we're going to soak in the hot pitch. Nope. And then this will get laid right on top of here like that. Cover up nice, because this part gets some abuse. So you're adding this fiber to it so that the pitch doesn't have a chance to just flake off. This will hold it together. And after many years, you'll eventually even start to see some of the cloth wearing through. It really holds up well. Probably. You want to work on that for a while? I build all this up with more pitch and smooth it out, and then clean up the edge, get rid of that stuff there. But there's the fiber. That'll take quite a blow from a stone or a log in the water. Ours has never leaked on the end there. And we've hit a lot of stuff. Okay, Ralph, one more time. I've used pliers before, but then they won't let go. My fingers are the only non-stick thing.
In the northern parts of the UP, white-tailed deer have adapted to deep snow conditions by migrating to locations that provide both food and shelter to survive the winter. Deer begin migrating typically in mid to late December. These migratory destinations are called deer wintering complexes, and currently there are 57 named complexes in the Upper Peninsula. In the Keweenaw there are 2, east and west, expanding from the Portage Canal north along the Lake Superior shoreline.
This is right kind of at the extreme for them, and with the weather that we've been getting and the snow, it just makes it very difficult for them. And because of the Portage Canal, they really can't travel too far south to get away from it. This is where they come, and we're just trying to help them out.
It's like ringing the dinner bell. If there's any that are hanging back, they hear this and come running, like those guys down there.
I met up with Richard and Cynthia Marsh just before feeding time, and the deer were already waiting for their supper.
My wife Cynthia and I purchased this property about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago now. The previous owner had been feeding deer here under permit with the DNR for almost 15 years. And one of the the handshake agreements was that we would at least continue feeding for at least 1 year, because he really was a big proponent of feeding the deer, and it was a big love affair for him. And it's kind of a full-time job starting in January and through May, basically feeding the deer every day. Right now we're running about 200 deer that we're feeding now, which is similar to what we were feeding last January. And then as we get into February and March, those numbers will jump sometimes as high as 400. There'll be a day in May we'll wake up and they'll be gone. Which it's amazing, and it's basically May through December. We only have about a dozen resident deer in this area here, but the numbers jump once the snow starts accumulating. Right now we're running, I think we're around 36 inches base on the ground. Once you get above 24 inches, it starts to become very difficult for the deer to dig down through to find any type of natural food. I mean, their go-to food would be acorns if they could get down to them, and that's why it's important that they have some type of food or a supplement. They're perfectly capable of scrounging and eating bark and tips of a lot of the browse that's out there. But with the food the way it is, and let's face it, they can't really travel too far once the snow gets this deep, and it's easy for them to overbrowse an area. So the supplemental feed tends to help them get through that. Otherwise, the mortality rate for the deer in this area would probably be closer to 50% without the supplemental feed.
The Marshes feed 1 ton of food every 5 days for a total of 15 tons in a season.
The feed for this project is graciously donated by the Calumet Keweenaw Sportsman's Club, and they've been feeding deer forever. They purchase typically around 60 tons of feed a year and distribute it to other feeders in the area. All of us basically are required to have a permit issued by the DNR authorizing us to feed. The permit from the DNR has very specific guidelines for us as to what we're supposed to do and what we can't do. Over the years, the club has pretty much settled on the pelletized feed because it's the best feed, and it has everything the deer need for this time of year. The previous owner was kind of a MacGyver when it came to that type of stuff, so he built that sled. It'll hold about 300 pounds of pellets, so we can get 6 bags in it. It puts out a nice line of pellets, and it tends to help to avoid a lot of the nose-to-nose contact that the DNR worries about, because with the way it spreads it out, it's most of the time the deer eat up the little line of pellets pretty quick, so they tend to just kind of move along a little better than if you would just put out a big pile. By putting out a line like we do and stringing it out for quite a while, it tends to spread out the feeding opportunity to a lot more of the deer. I've been a hunter most of my life, but I've learned more about deer in the last 1.5 years than I knew for the last probably 40 or 50 years. It's interesting to watch the way they become somewhat territorial over areas, the dynamics of them, especially when they're walking the deer trails. 2 of them will come together in a deer trail, and the dominant deer gets to stay in the deer trail, and the less dominant deer has to step off into the deep snow to let the dominant deer go by. It's just fascinating to watch. If they were here 365, they would probably drive us insane. But fortunately, we get about a 4 to 5 month reprieve from them.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.